Everybody, morning members, welcome to this morning's planning meeting. Today's meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast by way of the Council's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training and purposes within the Council. As you will see from the agenda papers, generally the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to being filmed and to possible use of these images and sound recordings being webcasting and or training purposes. Proposed public speakers have been made aware of the broadcasting arrangements prior to this meeting. Would members please use their microphones to contribute to the meeting, and please remember to switch off the microphone when you have finished. Members dialing in remotely, please turn on your camera for the duration of the committee as requested by the Planning Department. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using any mobile devices during the committee and any devices are on silent? Thank you. Do we have any apologies?
We do, Chair. So we've got Councillor Mark Howells, Jason Jordan and John Jones.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Pym? Okay. You have to... Okay, no, thank you. Could we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting on pages 3 to 6? Do we have anything arising from those minutes? All those agree? The minutes, give a proposal. Seconder. Okay. Oh, thank you. And the vote, please. All those in favour? Minutes. Councillor? Okay. Right. Moving on. Application number 1 is application number 25/0069. And it's a site at South Dock, East Way Road, Alexandra Docks, Newport, South Wales. And the presenting officer will be Adam Foote, West Area Development Manager. And we have one public speaker. Okay, thank you. Adam?
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks consent for the construction and operation of a mill that will produce a green alternative to cement. So this application is being reported to the Planning Committee for consideration as it meets the definition of major development. It's been screened under Schedule 2 of the Town and Country Planning Environmental Impact Assessment regs and concluded that the development is unlikely to have a significant environmental effect and is therefore not EIA development. The application site comprises of an irregularly shaped parcel of land to the south of Alexandra Dock within the limits of Newport Docks and is within the limits of the defined settlement boundary as identified by the Newport City Council Local Development Plan. The site has a generally flat topography and is separated by the internal road and rail network that serves the wider port. The site is located within flood zones 2 and 3 as identified by the current flood maps for planning and within area C2 when applying the previous development advice maps. The site is adjacent to the River Usk, site of special scientific interest and special area of conservation. The Usk then drains into the Severn Estuary Marine SAC, SSI, Ramsar and Special Area Protection, which is directly to the south of the development. So the site is currently arranged as hard standing and vacant of buildings, and the site's previously developed brownfield land in accordance with the definition contained within Planning Policy 12. Access is gained via the internal private highway network within the port, with Eastway Road linking to the A48, which then links into the wider highway network. So, the application seeks consent for the construction and operation of a vertical roller mill and ancillary development for the production of a green cement substitute with distribution of the final product by road and rail. The cement substitute has a lower carbon footprint than cement and allows for the recycling of a waste product from industrial processes. The raw materials for the cement production include byproducts of granulated blast furnace slag, which have been discarded and therefore falls within the definition of waste. They sit within the non-hazardous category specified by the European waste category. The mill has a utilitarian design that has been influenced by the utility of the operation. The mill operator has other plants within Europe, and the design and operation of the mill has been influenced by operational needs and best practice elsewhere. The site arrangement comprises of an area of an open storage and smaller maintenance warehouse adjacent to the dock to the north of Eastway Road, a larger warehouse building, mill, silos, office/lab and parking area to the south of Eastway Road, while the design of the buildings and wider site has been informed by its intended utility. The final details regarding the external finish have not been provided at this stage and therefore are sought to be controlled via condition. The development is proposed to run on a 24-hour basis and would result in the creation of 20 skilled jobs operating on 3 shifts per 24 hours. The raw materials will be delivered by ship as part of the ongoing operation of the port and exported by road and rail. The key considerations in the assessment of this application are the principle of the development, highway safety and accessibility, the economic impact, environmental impact, impact upon amenity and flood risk. So, as previously stated, the application site is within the defined limits of the settlement boundary and within the defined limits of the dock. Therefore, Local Development Plan Policy EM2, which applies to Newport docks, is applicable to the assessment of this application. EM2 allocates the docks for industrial uses falling within classes B1, B2 and B8. In this case, the proposed development falls within use classes B2 and B8. Accordingly, there is no conflict with the requirements of the policy. Additionally, the local development plan and wider national planning policies advocate for the reuse of previously developed land, and in accordance with the requirements of the local development plan policies, there's no conflict in response to the proposed development. Now, in terms of the access to the site, the application site is served by the internal private highway networks of the docks. Access to that road and the internal access is restricted, and access is gained via the A48, which then provides access into the wider highway network. The application is supported by a transport assessment, which concludes that the development would have a marginal impact upon vehicular movements to and from the site. The Local Highways Authority has confirmed that there is capacity within the local highway network to accommodate the additional vehicular movements without having an unacceptable adverse impact upon the highway network or highway safety. So the Local Highways Authority has raised some concern over the proposed route through the docks in relation to pedestrian and cycle routes and expressed a want for improvements to be made. As this land is outside the control of the applicant, it's beyond the scope of this application to secure such uses, particularly for a private highway network. However, ABP, who operate the port, have recently expressed an interest in such improvements. However, these would be explored separately. Parking provision on site is proposed to provide 27 spaces. The local highways authority have expressed that this is an oversupply of parking on site. However, the operator has expressed that this would be their want for parking provision to ensure that there is adequate parking on site to serve the operation. Additionally, the local planning authority are recommending a condition requiring a scheme for electric vehicle charging as to accord with the provisions of Future Wales, the national plan. So overall, the proposed development is considered to have an acceptable impact in respect of highway movements, and it's acknowledged that part of the export from the site will be via the road and rail networks. With regards to the economic impact, the proposed development would result in the creation of 20 skilled jobs and a further inferred number of jobs in the delivery and supply chain. Accordingly, the local planning authority raised no objection to the proposed development and welcomed the creation of jobs within Newport, and particularly skilled jobs, which will provide a stimulus to the wider local economy. The proposed development therefore accords with Objective 3, economic growth of the Newport City Local Development Plan. So, moving on to environmental impacts. The application site is adjacent to a number of protected sites. The development, as previously stated, is adjacent to the River Usk and its designations, which then drains into the Severn Estuary with its additional designations. Accordingly, the site has a significant ecological and environmental value which must be protected and any development mitigated and compensated for. NRW have been consulted on this application and raised no objection to the proposed development, subject to a condition requiring an construction environmental management plan, which would ensure that the construction phase of the proposal is acceptable in respect of pollution protection. Additionally, auger piling is being proposed during the construction. Both the local planning authority and NRW are satisfied that there will not be any significant impacts to fish given the proposed use. So I'm just going to jump ahead a few slides. So the proposed development includes an area of landscape planting along the southern and western boundary and around the proposed parking area. The proposed planting plan includes a mixture of native and ornamental shrubs, as well as the planting of 49 trees of native but mixed species. Given the existing context of the site and its limited existing ecological value, it's considered that the planting will result in a net benefit for biodiversity, meeting the requirements of Policy 9 of Future Wales, Chapter 6 of PPW 12 and Policy GP5 of the Newport Local Development Plan. The proposed landscape plan is considered to be proportionate to the scale and nature of the proposed development and sufficient to satisfy the requirements of the aforementioned policies. So, with regards to impact upon amenity, the application site comprises of a parcel of land within the docks. The surrounding uses are commercial and industrial. The land's allocated within the LDP for B1, B2 and B8. Given the use of the site as proposed, it's not considered that the proposal would result in any unacceptable adverse impact and is compatible with the surrounding uses. So the if I just go back, so the elevations will show a significant scaled building on either side of the internal road. So you've got the silos and large industrial buildings. Again, these have been designed for their intended use and for utility of the site. I'm going to move forward. We've got some sort of generated images from the landscape visual impact assessment that I think probably better demonstrate the proposed layout of the site. So to the immediate south of the dock, you have the open storage area and a smaller warehouse building. And then on the other side, you have the mill, the warehouse, and the silos. And then these images probably just put it into context a little bit better. So, we are talking about a large-scale building, but on an area used for industrial and commercial processes adjacent to other large buildings used for similar purposes. So the application is supported by a landscape visual impact assessment, which demonstrates the impact of the development in its context. It's the view of the local planning authority that the development would not have an unacceptable impact upon the visual impact or character of the area. And the landscape officer notes that there will be at worst a minor adverse impact upon the Wales coast path and offers no objection to the proposal. The application site, as previously mentioned, is within an area at risk of flooding. Due to the time that this application was submitted, it's pertinent to consider the proposal against the previous technical advice note for flooding and the current. So the previous technical advice note allocated the site, so the development advice map had the site within an area at risk of flooding at zone C2, whilst the current flood map for planning has the site partly within zone 2 and partly within a zone 3. So the proposal comprises of a less vulnerable form of development on land that's allocated for industrial and employment purposes. Due to the nature and location of the docks, flooding and the flood risk level here is unsurprising. The application is supported by a flood consequences assessment, which has informed the proposed development, with all staff areas and offices being located on upper floors outside of the flood risk depths. Additionally, the finished floor level of the mill building will be raised to at least 9.3 metres AOD, which meets the the prescribed change within the current technical advice note when applying it on the 1 in 200 year plus climate change events. This will ensure that the mill building is flood-free for the lifetime of the development. However, the clinker storage building will not be raised, as staff will not be stationed in this building. It will contain hoppers anchored to the floor, which can accept inundation, and all other structures will be placed on supports that raises them above the 1 in 1,000 year flood level. Whilst the proposed development would not be entirely flood-free and therefore not fully comply with the requirements of either the previous or current technical advice note 15, it's considered that flood risk on-site can be managed to an acceptable level for the lifetime of the development in accordance with the recommendations of the FCA, by providing that the most vulnerable elements of the development are outside of the expected flood depths and by introducing flood-resilient design. It's considered that any development on site would be unlikely to accord fully with the requirements of the TAN due to the proposed flood depths and the location adjacent, sort of adjacent to the sea. The LPA considers that the economic benefits of the development would outweigh the mitigated risk of flooding in this instance. NRW have been consulted on this application, and whilst they acknowledge the scheme would not fully comply with the requirements of the TAN, they raise no objection to the proposed development on the basis of flooding or flood risk. Surface water on site will be managed via the SUDS process due to the scale of the development, and an application has been submitted to the local authority, with the SUDS and drainage officers having been consulted on this application, raising no objection. So the application site is within a sewered area. However, foul drainage is to be discharged into a private sewage system or septic tank. Following an investigation into the foul service provision adjacent to the site, it was found that the existing system was not suitable to support the proposed development, and to overcome this issue, a septic tank is proposed to be installed with a connection for service adjacent to the proposed parking area. All venting and emptying points are proposed at a height that either exceeds the flood levels or are capped so that floodwaters would not penetrate the tank. The local planning authority are satisfied that the proposed development accords with the requirement of the relevant Welsh Government circular, and that sufficient information has been provided in support of the application to demonstrate the need for private sewage facility and to demonstrate compliance with the requirements of the matters covered within the aforementioned circular. Again, NRW raised no objection in respect of the use of a private sewage system in this location, given the constraints of the site. With regards to contaminated land and the potential for contamination. The application is supported by a Phase 1 desk study, which concludes the proposed development poses minimal risk in relation to contaminated land and any subsequent impact to controlled waters. Additionally, the CEMP, as suggested by NRW, would further secure such measures via the by a condition. The local authority's senior scientific officer has been consulted on this application and raises no objection in this respect. Initially, a concern had been raised by Welsh Water as the statutory service provider. As they'd noted that the application was crossed by some of their infrastructure. However, further investigation works has confirmed that the mains can be capped off, and therefore any work that is required would not be within the red line area, and therefore this negates the objection from, or the potential holding objection and concern from NRW. So, to conclude, the application seeks consent for an industrial use on landing allocated for such purposes within the local development plan. No objection is raised to the principle of the development. The use is compatible with the existing surrounding uses. The applicants have demonstrated that the use would not have an unacceptable impact upon amenity, ecology, biodiversity, highway safety or air quality. Accordingly, the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions. What I'm going to do is just go over, there's a few photos from the site just for some additional context, just to show the sort of extent of the site, surrounding built form. But essentially we are looking at a large area of relatively flat land that is arranged as hard surface, meeting the requirement or the definition of previously developed land within an area of industrial and commercial character. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adam. We now have one public speaker, and that's the agent, Richard Hunt. He'll be speaking via the Teams. Over to you.
Chair, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to address the committee today. We've spent a long time on this application, and we think that it is a very good development that will be highly beneficial to South Wales. I don't want to really add much to what was a very comprehensive and well thought out committee report, but I'd just like to emphasise a few points, if I may. It is sustainable development. It does bring a waste up the waste hierarchy, and that in itself is a policy benefit. And in the remainder, it is policy compliant with the exception as set out for, of TAN 15. But in this location, there is, I think, as stated, virtually nothing that can be done to change that flood alleviation issue. In terms of the economic benefits, the employment has been mentioned, but this also represents a significant internal investment in South Wales and in Newport, and it is multi-million pounds of investment that will benefit not just the employees but the wider economy through the product itself. This is, I've mentioned it's sustainable. It is a much lower carbon footprint for producing this form of cement than Portland cement. And so it will also provide competition in the local area, and it will provide support to the port itself. You know, the port has to function, and it's an important element of the coastal area. Again, I'd like to just emphasise that there are no objections to the proposal, that it is within the confines of a working port, and that the planning conditions themselves appear to be reasonable and are acceptable to the applicant. The At the moment, the applicant has no opportunity to affect the Eastway Road, but with the planning conditions requiring the provision of cycle parking and that sort of facility, welfare facilities for showers and so forth, we are more than happy to do what we can within the site that is in the applicant's control in order to support sustainable transport methods. A final note is that it has been a pleasure to deal with the case officer on this this application. There's been a lot of backwards and forwards, but it has been a very professional and enjoyable relationship. So I commend the application to you and look forward to working with Newport in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Can I now open this up to the members, please? Open up the members to Adam. Sorry, Matt.
Hi there, can you hear me? Yep. No, I mean on the TV screen. You mentioned that the raw materials are going to be imported via ship. Could you confirm which part, I'm assuming that this is going to be imported from other parts of the world outside the UK, could you confirm what countries at the moment most of the raw materials are expected to arrive from, please?
Hello, Mr. Hunt.
This is a question for me. It's not fixed at the moment. However, one of the major components is furnace slag, and there is a huge amount of this material sitting at Port Talbot, which has been deposited over the last, from the steel industry, however long the steel industry has been there, 100 years. So I'm afraid I can't give you, that is a normal sort of function of the port, which is not part of the application. So I'm afraid I can't give you a direct answer exactly where the material is coming from, but there are UK sources of this material.
If I can continue, Chair. With regards to the production, it stresses that it's going to be a sustainable operation. Will there be many byproducts or any hazardous waste left over afterwards, and how would that be disposed of? I've had a look through the notes, and from the notes there's very little byproduct of the process of creating this green cement, and I can't quite work out how much or what type of waste will be left over after the process.
There is there are no byproducts, there are no waste products. What you put into the mill comes out as the final product. It is heated, and so there is a steam element, but there is the intention to use a heat exchanger that will then cool that and minimise the amount of steam going to the air. In terms of other emissions, there is, the mill is there to produce a very fine powder product, and the air filters are in place to prevent any of that product from leaving, because any of that material going to air or going out of the site is material that's not going into the silo to then be sold. So there is very, very little and certainly no hazardous waste.
Chair, I've got two more questions, but happy for others to contribute before I ask them.
Okay, any other member? Councillor Cox.
I mean, in principle, I'm very much in favour of finding uses like this for appropriate areas in Newport and creating jobs. But but I was interested in the transport element. That I don't know how accurate the illustrations are, but there seems to be a lot of lorries around on the diagrams of the site here, and I just wondered. Obviously, I would have thought it'd be preferable in many ways for the local area, the local environment, the local road system, if as much of the product was shifted by rail as could be. And I'm just wondering what you expect the likely breakdown to be in terms of what's moved by rail and what's moved by road.
Yes, so we have the details of the expected movements contained within the transport statement and the transport addendum. I'm just going to see if I can find the sorry, there's something flew on me. Trying to find the numbers that are contained within that. But what I would say is that those have been produced and have been considered by the local highways authority, so and deemed to be acceptable. So let me just have a look. So in operational trips, the trip generation has been derived using the total tonnes by vehicles with appropriate payload. Sorry, 2 seconds. I'm just going through the assessment to find the. So what we have here is we've got the addendum splits it into daily average traffic movements. So what we have is in phase 2 we have this is a daily average traffic movements are on 2 ways are 18 movements for HGVs, and then obviously we'd have additional staff trips. And then I'm just trying to find where the rail information is. Oh, sorry. So peak hour trip generation. The gross peak hour would therefore be between 5 and 6 p.m. And the site generates 10 HGV trips, so 5 arrivals and 5 departures, and then 14 staff departure trips. So that would result in an additional 24 movements in the peak hour of operation.
Okay, does it mention rail there at all?
Oh, sorry, I don't have the rail information in front of me for from this addendum. Bear with me a second. Can I come back? I'll look through the transport assessment and come back to you if that's okay.
Okay.
Is that it, Councillor? Okay. Councillor Perkins?
Well, you mentioned a welfare unit and cycle storage, although it's not part of the application. Is it possible to make that a condition of the application?
So we have included a condition requiring the cycle storage to be provided and submitted to the local planning authority for consideration prior to the beneficial use. And then the other elements would be contained within the buildings on site, so they are proposed already.
But you mentioned that they weren't part of the plan, but they will be a part of it now then.
So what won't be a part of it? Sorry, I think
he mentioned that the welfare unit, the showering block, wasn't part of the plan.
Oh, no, we do have that detail.
You do?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watkins?
Chair, we can't hear him. I can't hear him online. I don't know if the others can.
So you can't hear?
No, we can't hear Councillor Watkins online.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, we still can't hear him.
Okay, you're changing the mic now. Try this.
Yeah. Okay. Chair, I'm concerned about the goods coming in by boat or ship, which is being stored on the dock. If there is high tide and flooding, how is that going to be contained on the dockside? That's one of the questions, Chair.
So the area is currently used for open storage, so that exists already along the port and throughout the docks. So that's a normal sort of part of the function and role of the docks. Additionally, in this case, the proposal is for a non-hazardous waste to be stored there. So the local planning authority, the senior scientific officer, and NRW are satisfied that this wouldn't have any unacceptable impact.
The other one, Chair, is a condition that vehicles coming into the dock with goods to be distributed can, especially if they're talking about this ash which is coming from Port Talbot or whatever it might be is coming from, the vehicles have to be covered, because obviously it creates a lot of dust, which is another thing which I'm looking at in regards to what sort of dust suppression are the developer putting in place, because in the past, where we have developers crushing material, as you, Chair, know very well in your ward, we've had a serious amount of dust flying across, I would say, half a mile or more. And I'm concerned that the maintenance of the dust suppression units could possibly fail. And what mitigating circumstances have they got in place to be able to control that?
So, with regards to the aggregate is brought in by boat. So, primarily brought in by boat. So, it would then be unloaded and stored on the dock side. The actual process of it, there's very little output in terms of dust in that respect, because the aggregate is recycled or reused, so it's within the operator's interest to utilise the all of the product. So we have that firstly, but secondly, we do have sort of mechanisms in place for the production, and the air filter sort of filtration system that is proposed is designed so that there would be very little in the respect of output from dust in that respect. So we have an air quality assessment submitted as part of the application, which sort of covers this, and it essentially concludes that there's very little that would impact in respect of air quality or output from the proposed development. So again, the Council's Senior Scientific Officer and NRW have been consulted on this, and they're both satisfied with the conclusions of the assessments that have been produced.
Chair, the question which I'm trying to get at is what happens if those air suppression units fail what mitigation has been put in place? Do they switch the plant off until such times it's repaired, or do they just let it go? That's what I'm trying to find out. If there's a plan B if they fail.
Thank you, Chair. Adam, can you answer? Or perhaps the agent be able to...
Well, as I said, this isn't something we routinely request, Councillor. If it does fail, there are other provisions in place in terms of to ensure there's no pollution, so there's other mechanisms in force. That's not something we would look to detail or condition. If something goes wrong, as with any facility, it would be for them to make sure that they're adhering to the relevant legislation. So we wouldn't be able to respond to that, I'm afraid.
Councillor Cox.
Can I ask, if a large proportion of the raw product is raw materials coming from Port Talbot, is that also going to be moved by ship? Or is that component going to be moved by other means?
Primarily, the aggregates will be brought in by ship, which is, again, why this particular location is being sought. It's so... Pardon? Oh, yes, irrespective of sort of where it's being brought from, this location adjacent to the docks and adjacent to the South Dock here is being sought for its sort of utility. So it allows boats, ships of a certain size to come in for there to be the unloading to happen, the storage, and for the industrial process all to happen on site. So it does sort of the nature of the use and the requirements that they have for a site does rule out certain other sites as being viable.
Councillor Flynn, do you want to submit?
Yes, Chair. This is considered a sustainable product, and it seems to be too good to be true. It's brilliant in theory, this green cement. In terms of the power source to create the green cement, can we just have confirmation how that is going to be achieved? Is that an electrical power supply? And if so, where would that power supply come from? Is that coming straight from the national grid, or would that be created on site via the green technology?
So the proposal doesn't include sort of solar or other sort of green energy sources, if that makes sense. But the power would be derived from the grid.
Okay.
Okay. Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. One further question. There's been, on the application, a number of, I would say, conditions being requested by different organisations. Can the officers confirm that all these conditions have been put in place?
The only condition that isn't carried forward, to my knowledge, is one from NRW requiring restricting the construction operation to within or to be outside a window of high and low tide. However, when we essentially went back for clarity on the wording and what the objective of that condition was and what it was trying to achieve to NRW, because the way that it was initially worded and is worded within their response was vague or sort of ambiguous. So we wanted to ensure that the condition would meet the tests within the relevant circular. Throughout that discussion, NRW had concluded that actually there was no need for that condition to be standalone and it could be included within the KEMP. So essentially that condition has fallen away because it can be, or those details can be included within the construction environment management plan.
Councillor Pym.
Thank you, Chair. Again, assuming that this product is stored, has different storage conditions to normal Portland cement. So Portland cement is very vulnerable to the elements, so any moisture can impact on the storage. And so with regards to the silos, this is a safe, non-hazardous product in storage. Assuming that there's going to be a high turnover of the product because of the demand, hopefully, for green cement moving forward, are there any risks attached to the silos in terms of the storage long term if this product is left for long periods, or is there anything that can impact on it that would make its storage unsafe?
Not that I'm aware. The process uses non-hazardous aggregates in their process, and then the output is also non-hazardous. So there's nothing that the local planning authority are aware of that would be a risk in that regard.
Okay.
Councillor Watkins.
It's following on from that question, really, Chair, and that is the product which comes in by boat. Is there anything added to it, or is it just crushed into a powder form and stored in the silos?
So it's not necessarily that it's just crushed. There are, I don't know the exact science behind how they create it, but there are additional components, and then the output is the green cement.
Councillor Perkins.
So going to the landscaping and trees planting, it says maintained for 5 years. Why is that not for the lifetime of the buildings, and who takes over looking after them after the 5 years?
So the 5 years is a standard that's contained within the conditions circular, and it's just a sort of a well-used sort of time frame that ensures that the landscaping is bedded in, has established, and will fulfil its function. In respect of the ongoing maintenance of the site, this is all private land, so the operator of the mill has their portion. They will be responsible for its upkeep and maintenance. If they default or leave the site, then we have hopefully a different operator, or ABP, who are the operators of the port. They have overall control over the entire docks.
Councillor Pym.
Sorry, Chair. Last question from me. I do welcome this investment, and the questions are just caution, really. Looking at the drawing in front of us, are there any underground basement cavity areas that would require confined space operations, or is everything you see on the ground floor on a solid base in terms of the operation? And would this type of operation require a shutdown during a year for maintenance? It says it's going to be operating 24 hours a day, assuming that would be 365 days of the year. Would there be scheduled works for maintenance, and if so, is that factored into the planning?
So there's nothing, other than the septic tank, there's nothing below ground level, and primarily this is an area at risk of flooding. So most development here, as you can see with the silos, so I have stopped sharing my screen, but it's still stuck on screen, so apologies. So everything is above ground level other than the septic tank. So there's nothing below. In terms of scheduled maintenance, I don't have that level of detail. That would be for the operator.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask a question, please, to the agent. Could you tell me, I've worked in the construction industry quite a long time now, And Portland cement is quite, it can be quite contaminous and dangerous. It can burn the skin. Would you say this is an improvement, health and safety-wise, on the operatives using your new products?
Ooh. I haven't worked in the construction industry, and I have used cement and concrete, and I understand the dangers that come with it. I understand that the chemical reaction is very much the same, and that this green cement does take slightly longer to go off, but when it has hardened, it is harder than a concrete used for with Portland cement. But I cannot guarantee that there is an improvement to health and safety aspects at the point of use. I'm afraid that's outside my sphere of knowledge.
Okay, is this product being used elsewhere as well? I know it's fairly new. This is a new product.
Yeah. The company that is proposing to build this plant has another plant has been operating for years in Belgium. There are other companies within the UK who are producing green cement now. There is a company in Ireland called EcoSem, which is also producing using the same materials. It's a widely accepted product.
Okay, thank you. I'm interested because I might have to specify this someday, and I want to know what the product's about, so I'll have to look into that. Thank you. Councillor Horton.
Am I correct in the assumption that this is just a modernised version of what is being bolted onto the front end of a steel making plant since they've been in construction, as in the disposal of the slag off the heavy end? Because if it's what I believe it is, they've been around for years, and because they're built into the steelworks or bolt onto the steelworks, we don't see them, because most of us don't get to go into a steelworks. And as such, it's something which I don't believe we really need to be that concerned with, because they've been around for a long time. It's just a modernised version, which is a bit cleaner. I can see Tim's nodding his head, because, like myself, he's worked in the steel industry, and it's for me, it's a no-brainer. It's a straightforward yes.
In response to that, I don't. To confirm that yes, this is not a new project. It's not a new industry. Whether or not they're present on existing steelworks, I don't know that. Again, this is something that's been designed to reuse the waste products that do come out of places such as the steelworks. So but I don't know if it's something that's typically associated with those operations.
It is. It has been since they started using blast furnaces.
Okay, Councillor Harvey, got your hand up? Councillor Harvey? No?
I was just agreeing with Gavin.
No, I was just agreeing with Gavin. If this slag ain't going into the landfill, then I think to be used for something else as another byproduct is, I'm all for it. Like Gavin said, most steel plants got a company factory somewhere or another where they use the slag to make cement. So, and if this is greener and it stops it going to landfill, I think it's a win-win. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. Okay, again.
No.
You've got your mic still on, Councillor?
Oh, fine, sorry.
Okay, if you're raising your hand again? Yeah.
just one final question from me, Chair. I wondered if we can put a condition on there that if the developer comes back with an amendment to the plans at all, it comes back to committee.
We couldn't add that as a condition, Councillor, but as I said, if anything changes materially or they're outside of their planning permission, then they need a new application for that, in which case ward members could call it in if they wanted to.
Okay, if everybody's finished, if we can move on then, please, to all those in favour of the... Sorry? Oh, yeah, okay. Can we have somebody to move the officer's recommendation? Councillor Perkins, seconder. Councillor Pym. Okay. Sorry? Yeah, okay. All those in favour, please show your hands. Okay, that's on myself. Thank you, that's passed. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Moving on. Item 2, page 35 to 45. This application number is 25/0471. It's for 60 Ombersley Road, Newport, and it's in the Altarine ward. We have one ward speaker, which is Councillor Pat Truitt, and again the presenting officer is Adam Foote. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Chair. So,
We're just waiting for Councillor Pym to return. There we go. Okay, it looks like we're all ready. Thank you. Over to you, Adam.
thank you. This application seeks consent for the change of use of number 60 Ombersley Road to a 9-bedroom house of multiple occupation. The application site is located within a residential area. It's within the defined settlement boundary and is within close proximity to the Handpost local centre. Therefore, we consider it to be a highly sustainable location, and there's no conflict with regards to the use of the property with its surrounding residential uses. The committee members may remember this application as it was previously reported to Planning Committee earlier this year, seeking consent for the use of the property to an 8-bedroom house of multiple occupation, and committee resolved to approve that consent. That consent is currently being implemented. So the alteration here is the use of the property as a 9-bedroom HMO opposed to the 8, and you'll note on the front elevation, the garage is proposed to be utilised for additional living space, and that is the proposed change. So the only other external alterations are the addition of the rear dormer, which was considered under the previous application and is currently being implemented and constructed, and the addition of the ecological enhancements of the bird and bat boxes. But this application obviously results in the change of the alteration of the garage to be used as an additional bedroom and residential accommodation. So the proposed layout we have here, so you'll note no significant change. And in terms of the proposed living space, we have the existing outbuildings proposed to be utilised for bin, bike storage and a general store. The layout is largely the same as was previously reported, with the living and kitchen accommodation on the rear of the property. You will note the annotation for the one-bed or one-person bedroom 9 in the garage with an ensuite, so that's proposed to be converted. And then all the other bedrooms are sort of well in excess of the minimum standards as set by the licensing requirements. All bedrooms are proposed with a ensuite bar 1, which has its own designated off-suite, which is on the first floor. So you'll note, so it's bedroom 4, which is served by the off-suite, and all others have their own ensuite bedrooms. So you'll note the size of the rooms as proposed. They are significantly above that minimum licensing standard threshold. So finally, the loft is already converted and available to use as residential accommodation. It's proposed to be subdivided to provide an additional 2 bedrooms, and the dormer window is proposed on the rear roof plane as per the previous application that is currently being implemented. So the primary considerations in respect of the proposed application are the principle of the development. So with regards to the establishing the principle, we consider the concentration of HMOs within the area. As this is essentially already been granted consent to be used as a HMO, the addition of 1 further bedroom would not increase the concentration. It just intensifies the use of an existing HMO that's been granted consent. However, it has been considered with regards to the requirements of the policy and is compliant in that respect. In terms of living conditions of future occupiers, it's considered that we have generously sized bedrooms and an appropriately sized living kitchen area to be able to support all the occupiers, including the additional bedroom 9. The local authority's licensing department has been consulted on this application and raises no objection in that regard. Additionally, there is a rear garden area that would be available for use of all future occupiers. With regards to parking provision and trip generation, the application is supported by a parking assessment which demonstrates that there would be sufficient capacity within the existing highway network as to support the proposed development. Equally, I think it's sort of worth noting that given that the lawful use of this site is for an 8-bedroom house of multiple occupation, we are considering the increased impact of that 1 additional occupier. So again, the local highways authority have been consulted and raised no objection in this regard. Equally, we do have details of we have provision for a bike storage area within the rear stores. And then I'll just go through some general photos to give a better indication of the proposal. So currently the house is under construction as the previous consent is being implemented. So you'll note the scaffolding and structures around the site. You'll note the garage is existing, so it just needs conversion into that additional living space. There's a view of the rear amenity space that would be available for the occupiers. And then I'll show you the scale of the bedrooms. And again, I think you'll note that they are clearly well above the minimum standards as prescribed by the licensing agency. So we essentially have a residential use within a residential area in a sustainable location with no objection from the licensing department or the local highways authority, and the proposal is compliant with our with the relevant local development plan policies, and essentially the existing lawful use that's currently, or the consent that's currently being implemented, is for the use of the property as a 8-bedroom HMO, and this is seeking the addition of one further occupier. So the loft space, you note, it's previously converted. They're doing the enabling works, but you've got good head height within the within it, and then that's the image into the garage that is proposed to be converted into the additional living space. And then you have an image of the existing stores. So the recommendation for this application is to approve, subject to conditions. Again, the fallback position here is the use of the property as a 8-bedroom HMO, which has previously been consented. So the uplift of one additional person is not considered to result in any unacceptable adverse impact that would result in the local planning authority resisting the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adam. Over to members. Oh, sorry. We have a public speaker, Councillor Pym. Sorry. Councillor Druitt.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for hearing me this morning. This planning application is asking the question of this committee: how many sardines can you fit into a tin? Except in this case, the sardines are people. So I strongly object to this proposal, 60, for a 9-bedroom HMO in a quiet residential street. Residents are deeply concerned about the cumulative impact this further intensification of HMOs in this area will have on our established community, local infrastructure and residential character of the area. This neighbourhood is already dominated by HMOs, at least 2 on Ombersley Road, 3 West Park Road and 6 along Whisker Road. The 50-metre radius assessment does not reflect the lived experience and is distorted in this case by overly unusually long gardens, about 20 metres long, and when you have those backed onto one another, that's nearly the 50 metre limit already used up. So residents already experience a cumulative impact of high turnover of residents, weakened community bonds, increased disturbance and reduced stability for long-term households. A 9-bed HMO generates a huge monthly income for the landlord at the expense of local residents. The landlord is attempting to cram more and more individuals into one house, putting profit before people. A 9-bed HMO also generates far more household waste than a single household, and nearby HMOs already struggle with proper refuge storage. Overflowing bins, mixed waste streams and bags left on pavements attract rats, cause smells and obstruct the pavement. The landlord is responsible for ensuring adequate storage and proper presentation of waste, yet this application offers no enforceable waste management plan, with no named person accountable. Without clear controls, the area will deteriorate further under a mountain of refuse on the pavement. The applicant claims that increasing from 8 to 9 bedrooms has minimal effect. Well, the existing lawful use requires 3 car spaces, while a 9-bed HMO should really require 9 spaces, and this is already an area where street parking is extremely difficult. Streets have been at breaking point, informal parking arrangements have been lost, and the survey submitted does not reflect real conditions. Existing HMOs have already resulted in noise and antisocial behaviour. In this planning application, if this planning application is approved, 9 unrelated adults will intensify the damage to the cohesion of the area from not having an enforceable waste management plan, cramming more and more people into one house, like sardines, putting profit before people, over-concentration of HMOs in the area, inadequate parking spaces, lack of privacy, strain on local infrastructure and impact on the residential character of the area. I respectfully urge the committee to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pym.
Yes, Chair. I agree with most of the comments that Councillor Druitt raised there. It appears once again that profit is being put in front of people and a standard of living that you'd expect. 8 bedrooms within a 2-storey property would be considered extreme, in my opinion. 9 bedrooms is taking it to another level. I didn't see on the pictures a living room as such. I saw lots of images of unprepared bedrooms that were at the start of refurbishment. Could you confirm, apart from the bedrooms, what general meeting, socialising areas there are in this property, or is there an expectation that people will cook their food in the kitchen and then go back to their bedrooms to live their lives when they're at home?
Sorry, Chair, can I just jump in and ask for a point of clarification, please? Before we go any further with what we're talking about.
Councillor, okay.
It's just a point of clarification, because I think if I'm right in what I'm thinking, we're going to go round in circles. Am I correct in believing that the 8 bedrooms has already been granted and the default position of whatever decision we make is the 8 bedroom stays? Is that correct?
Yes.
So we're literally only talking about the additional bedroom 9 for the garage. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
So could I move that we only actually talk about that additional bedroom and none of the other spaces, please? Because that's already been granted.
Fair enough.
Would that be fair and logical?
Yeah, Adam?
Yes, I'm satisfied with that. Like you said previously, the previous application was reported to committee for the 8-bedroom HMO, and that was granted consent. So this is utilising the existing garage for an additional residential use. So it would increase the number of occupiers from 8 to 9. So with regards to that uplifted impact, we are looking at the addition of 1 further person in terms of trip and traffic generation, impacts upon all other material impacts that were considered previously. In terms of the living space, it's been confirmed that we have a suitable amount of living space in accordance with the required licensing standards to serve the property as a 9-bedroom house of multiple occupation. So in terms of the parking impact, again, the fallback position here is the 8 bedrooms. The owner of the property is currently implementing that consent. When I went on site, those works are being carried out so that the 8-bed can be, can function essentially. But just to go over some of the points that have been raised, with regards to the concentration of HMOs in the area, we've considered this against our adopted standards. They are our standards that we have adopted as a council to assess the impact upon social cohesion and to ensure that the character of the area is not sort of damaged to an unacceptable degree. It meets the 50 metres as required, but I've also checked the 100-metre radius. That also meets that requirement. So, even taking in a further radius, we are still compliant with the sort of requirements and stipulations of our adopted parking standards. With regards to refuse that was brought up, we do have a dedicated bin store on site. Now, the onus and the requirement for that to be managed sits with the licensee. Beyond that, I don't know really in the assessment of a planning application, we have a adequate and separate bin storage, and really if there's an issue with refuse, that needs to be dealt with via the appropriate channels, as it would with any house or block of flats or HMO. It is in that sort of regard. In response to the councillor calling it, sort of an over-concentration and, referring to it as sardines, there are adopted standards from a licensing requirement. These bedrooms are significantly over that, and each person would have their own ensuite. So I don't know that I would agree with that characterisation. I think, what we have here is a sort of, in respect of a HMO, we have large rooms, we have private bathroom facilities, and we have adequate living space, again, to accord with those adopted or with the licensing standards. So, in respect of any potential impacts in terms of antisocial behaviour or anything of that ilk, the character of occupiers is not a material planning consideration, and that could arise from a family occupying a single dwelling house. So we cannot take that into consideration. Ultimately, this is a residential use within a residential area, and as has been previously pointed out, we are considering the impact of 8 to 9. So that is the primary consideration with regards to this application.
Okay, so that answers a lot of questions. Have you got any more? Councillor Watkins?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like the legal officer's definition of this, because the application says change of use for dwelling C3 to a 9-bedroom house of multiple occupation. Now, if we decided as a committee to refuse this application, how can the developer come back and fall back on the 8-bedroom of multiple occupation? I can understand it if he's had the application approved for 8, but what should be in front of us now is just an application to change the garage, an additional garage. But it's not. Here is an application for a 9-bedroom house, not an additional garage. So it's a bit complicated, and what is the legal process there in regards to that? I understand that there's a possibility it would go to fall back on an 8-bedroom house of multiple occupation. But if we refuse this for a 9-bed, surely that would fall as well.
No, they've already got consent for the 8-bedroom HMO, so that's your sort of baseline then. They've got that consent. Nothing that we do today can alter that. It's just the phrasing, and I'm sure Adam can sort of clarify further of why the application is worded in this particular way, but it's to change the use. It's the extra garage that's an extra bedroom for use as a HMO, so it's 9 in total. But nothing changes their fallback of their consented 8.
But why didn't the applicant just put an application to change the garage to a living accommodation? That would have been far simpler and would have been able to do it. But he is asking for a 9-bed house now of multiple occupation, and I think that if this was refused, I can't see how the 8 multiple occupation can take place, because we've already refused the 9. I know we accepted the 8, and you could develop that.
So the 8 is the fallback position, whatever happens. That he's implemented that's an extant planning permission. So notwithstanding what members decide today, they can implement that. They have implemented. They can carry on with that. They can operate that. They could have applied. They could have operated it completely, done it out, and then applied for an additional room. They could have done that, but they can do this as well. From a planning perspective, it doesn't make any difference, really. They can apply for what they want, and we consider that. So if they'd implemented the 8 and then came in a year for an additional, they could have done that from an 8-bedroom HMO to a 9-bed. But just saying from a house to a 9-bed doesn't make any material difference in terms of what you're considering today. The 8-person HMO is a material fallback position. It has been implemented. They're doing the works. They're not operating. And that's what you need to bear in mind.
One further question. Would the occupant have to reapply for a new licence now?
It's not something that we deal with directly with licensing, but I would assume they'd need a new licence for HMO for the extra bedroom, because it would need to be inspected in the same way.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
What I'm going to say, I've said before, that on the committee, obviously, there's enormous. Every time an HMO comes up, there's real anxiety on the part of the members in terms of whether we should approve it or not. And to be quite frank, that we're put in a position as councillors where obviously if taking the advice of the officers that if we do refuse this, that it may bounce back on us by there being an appeal and it potentially costing the council money and staff time, etc. And it seems in that sense a bit of a pointless exercise. But I do feel, as a member of the committee, we really are over a barrel on HMOs. And if I can just make this point, because I know this isn't anything that's going to go in the approval or, but there is something fundamentally wrong because I don't think all these concerns that keep coming up in this meeting are all about nothing. I mean, obviously, there was a motion passed at last full council meeting relating to this. But we only have to use our eyes walking around the street. And I'm not making any comment about this particular applicant, who I don't know. I have no view at all on the particular applicant. But you only have to walk around the streets. I mean, walk around where I live or walk around many parts of Newport. And there's something fundamentally wrong because, we talk about waste management, but it clearly is largely ignored that I know for a fact that landlords have to get tenants to sign an agreement to manage the waste according to council procedure. And that just obviously doesn't happen. The evidence of walking out of here for a couple of 100 yards would show that that doesn't happen. In other words, that we passed the HMO approval here, but there's no actual enforcement which overcomes all the issues that are constantly coming up here about the management of waste, about the general maintenance of the property, the state of the gardens, etc., etc. And I just don't, you know, I really do hope, and obviously after the last full council meeting, that this whole issue was raised. I really do think there's some fundamental issue here that that we need to start addressing as a council.
Could I just answer that? I believe if there is an issue regarding with the waste being pulled out on the bins outside, or there's an issue internally and the management of that HMO is not being carried out, and I think the enforcement officers, is that correct? Could they
well, with respect, Chair, if I can, a point of explanation, I wasn't having a go at the enforcement officers from the planning department, because my understanding is that that is not their responsibility to. But it surely is a responsibility of the council, I'm assuming it's housing, to actually make sure that landlords, once they have granted an HMO, actually do enforce the conditions which, because there's a separate process, isn't it? We're just talking about planning. It's a process of actually approving the HMO. And the conditions which landlords sign up to in that are clearly not, you know, we're just walking outside here now, that those conditions are not enforced.
Yeah, all I can say, as I said, from the planning perspective, we do speak to colleagues in licensing, and we do speak to colleagues in waste to get their views on planning applications. I appreciate there's a very strong feeling around HMOs. Clearly, there's a very strong public perception of them, of the types of tenants that they house, for example. So on a planning application, when it's in advance of something happening, we do get a lot of these concerns. I would refute the statement that you can definitely spot a HMO from waste. Myself, as I said, that happens with individual properties, houses as well. But we do have controls as a council to investigate matters, either from a waste or licensing perspective. So I am aware of the comments and concerns, and I can guarantee we do speak to, and we will be speaking with colleagues to try and get a better understanding of tackling some of the perceived issues with HMOs relative to all types of property, not just HMOs. So I do note the comments and say that, but as I said, what we do, we bring the views of people together from a planning perspective to make that recommendation to you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Rheoli. Got your hand up?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think we're trying to close the stable door after the horse has definitely bolted here. I'm in agreement with Councillor Horton. I certainly don't feel like I'm being put over a barrel here as being a member of the committee. Unfortunately, gentlemen, this was granted, and members who granted it on that day were probably made the right decision in their mind for whatever reason. What we can't do is we can't undo that. However, we need to really concentrate on what's before us, as Councillor Horton has said, and deal with that issue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Perkins.
As you said, this has already been granted as an 8-bedroom, and they are only asking for the additional. It's a ground floor. They've got ground floor bedrooms in there. It is outside the flood risk area due to where it is in Newport, and unfortunately, it is the houses in that area are big houses, and families tend to want smaller houses. We do need more housing. this is the better HMO that we've seen. The rooms are quite large. They all have their own private bathrooms. I can't see that there is much to object to. Parking, yeah, not everybody drives, and we do need to get away from, oh, we've got to provide parking spaces. I think it is a very good HMO offer. I'm always complaining about the size of the rooms. It says that they're going to be single occupied, and that is a licensing decision and enforcement, not ours. I have to go with what's on there. The sizes for a single person with their own bathrooms. It's one of the better HMOs we've had.
Thank you, Councillor. Can we now move to the officer's recommendation to grant this application on the 9-bedroom from 8 to 9?
Chairman, I wonder if I could put a condition on that. And that would be, if it is granted, if the officer is happy with it, subject to licensing approval, because licensing have to go back in and approve it.
We can't attach a condition, Councillor, that's controlled by other legislation. So licensing are aware of the application, and we can email licensing. If members are minded to and do approve the application, then we can let licensing know it's been approved. We couldn't put a condition on because it's controlled by other legislation.
Could we not? Okay.
We can put an advice note on.
Wouldn't it have been helpful if licensing had looked at this before to give us a steer? Maybe they're not going to approve it. I can't assume they are.
They may not approve it, but to lawfully benefit from any use, as I said, if this was granted by members today, planning permission has been granted, they still need their licence in place, and if they don't, they couldn't operate it as such. So they operate independently. I know they're closely linked, but they need both permissions in place to be able to operate.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Harvey, you've got your hand up there.
Yes, Chair. Wouldn't it have made sense for them to go to licensing first before they came to planning?
We can't control that, but I suppose whichever one goes first, someone will comment, why haven't they got the other? So I suspect they might be running in tandem. They could do that. But as I said, I can't advise whether they have. They might already have their licence. I'm just not aware that they do.
Well, surely we should know, because this seems to me like a catch-22 now. We've granted an 8-bedroom. They're asking us to give an additional bedroom, but for them to have an additional bedroom, they've got to have a licence for a 9-bedroom. This is going round in circles. Surely it would have been easier if this was all explained to the person in the first place. Don't get me wrong, I think this HMO is one of the better ones we've seen. But what I'm saying is, I don't know what I'm saying. Maybe you should have gone to licensing first for them to get their licence for a 9-bedroom, and this just could have gone through easier than it's going through at the moment.
They need both. They need planning permission, they need a licence, irrespective of which order they do. As I said, licence, they might already have the licence, and planning permission could be refused. That's effectively how it could work. They need both in place, and we're just considering the planning application, the planning merits today. But we will, if members do approve the application, contact the licensing team to make them aware of the decision.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think that would be the best way to go at the moment, anyway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. Can we have those in favour? Can we have a proposer, please, for the officer's recommendation to grant? Councillor Perkins, seconder. Oh, sorry, Councillor Horton. Thank you. Can we have a show of hands, please? All those in favour? Yeah. Sorry? Oh, yes, sorry, and myself. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for and 1 against. Okay, thank you, that's carried. Okay, moving on to application number 3.
Can we have a comfort break, Chairman?
Would members
5
like a
minutes.
5-minute break? Yes? Okay, we'll have a 5-minute toilet comfort break and then return. Back at 1:45. Councillor Horton and Councillor Harvey, are you on there? Can you switch on, please? Thank you, Councillor Horton. Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, Chair, I was just finishing a crisp one.
Your mic is on. No, it's not. Right. Okay. Well, application number 3 is application number 25/0841, and the site is 7 Conway Road, Newport. This is in the Beechwood ward. The presenting officer is Joanne Davidson, East Area Development Manager, and we have 2 ward councillors speaking, Councillor Pym and Spencer. We also have some late representations received, and we have another public speaker. Public speaker. Okay, we have a public speaker. Sorry, your name. Okay, sure.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair has said, this is application 25/0841, so we're bringing this forward. It's the last item on your agenda, 7 Conway Road. The application is for the change of use of a 2-bedroom residential property to a 4-bedroom house in multiple occupation, which is use class C4. The application is before committee upon the request of Councillor Davis, and please note, as the Chair has mentioned, that a late representation report was issued on this item yesterday. The property is a mid-terrace dwelling house fronting Conway Road, which can be accessed via Chepstow Road. It's situated in an urban residential area, which is characterised by rows of terrace dwellings within a short walk of commercial premises on Chepstow Road, and approximately 180 metres from the nearest bus stop on Chepstow Road. So the aerial photo on the slide now has the property pinned. As you can see, this is Chepstow Road, running through here, Wharf Road, main district centre over here. The existing layout, I'll move on to that in a second, just some more photos and aerials showing the context. It's this property. I think you can see my cursor. Yeah, it's this property here. So the existing layout, which is on the left of this slide, is typical of a dwelling, with a lounge, kitchen and shower room at ground floor and 2 bedrooms and a bathroom at first floor. The proposed plan on the right provides a lounge, kitchen and enlarged shower room at ground floor and 4 bedrooms at first floor. Here's some photographs, I should say, of the exterior and interior. So the exterior, just behind this van. My cursor's working. So my cursor is on the ground floor, communal space. Slightly different angle there, looking towards the rear. This is the kitchen area and what would have been the downstairs shower room, which has currently been gutted. Upstairs, we've got a few photos of the front bedroom, which is to be subdivided. Again, 2 angles on that one. And then the 2 other, what will be bedrooms. So you can see the bottom right is currently the upstairs bathroom. The property has a spacious, enclosed rear garden, where it is proposed to site a bike store. One thing you'll note from the report report is that officers have picked up that the one-side boundary is quite low at present. So on this middle photo, the one on the left, quite low. So that we've suggested a condition to ensure that that means of enclosure is increased more in line with the one on that you can see on the right-hand side. The property will remain a house. In this case, up to 4 occupants are proposed. As a 2-bedroom dwelling, we can typically expect 2 to 4 occupants, albeit these will normally be related. In a HMO, like a dwelling, the occupants are expected to live as a household, sharing facilities in the property. The local planning authority can only concern itself with land use planning considerations in the public interest, and consequently concerns for the identity of future HMO occupiers and other similar matters will not ordinarily inform a planning application assessment and are not considered relevant to this case. Some matters, as we've already discussed, are regulated by other parties. So the main planning considerations of this application are the potential impacts of the change of use on parking provision and highway safety, as well as the impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area and neighbouring properties, the amenity of future occupiers, and flood risk. Policy H8 of the adopted LDP relates to self-contained accommodation and houses in multiple occupation and says that HMOs will only be permitted if specified criteria are met. The full policy wording is set out at paragraph 7.3.1 of the assessment. The adopted HMO SPG introduces a threshold above which HMOs are considered to detract from the character of the area. In general, the Council will not support a planning application that would take the number of HMOs considered as a proportion of the local housing stock above a specified limit. This site is located within the 10% threshold area. So when we take a 50-metre radius from the address point of the application site, the full front elevations of 38 properties are caught. There is one existing registered HMO within the 50-metre radius. Therefore, if the application were to proceed, there would be 5.3% of the housing stock as HMOs, and the 10% threshold would not be exceeded. Consequently, HMO concentration levels are not grounds to refuse permission in this case. Gwent Police have commented and considered the increase in HMOs within the 50-metre radius and confirmed the current call volume and demand on police resources arising from the existing HMO close by is not having any detrimental effect on policing or the community. The addition of another HMO raises no police objections. All communal amenity space, as shown on the right-hand side plans, is comfortably above licensing standards. Each of the 4 bedrooms is located at first floor and exceed the minimum single bedroom size as per the Council's HMO licensing standards. They are 6.55 square metres, 8.4 square metres, 7.9 square metres and 6.6 square metres. A site visit has been undertaken and measurements taken by the case officer on site to verify the submitted plans. Each room is served by a good-sized window, is of square or usable plan form and benefits from natural light, outlook and ventilation for each occupier. As previously mentioned, access to a generous rear garden is provided to residents, and this provides opportunity for cycle storage, as well as retaining a patio and grassed amenity space for 4 residents to use. In relation to parking and highway matters, the 4-bedroom HMO would require 1 space per bedroom, so a total of 4 spaces, and therefore results in a small increase in parking demand over the existing dwelling of 2 spaces. No objection is raised to this application by the Council's highway officer. The site is in a highly sustainable location, close to a major arterial route that is well served by bus. It is only approximately 500 metres from the main district centre. It is therefore a location where walking and cycling would be a realistic alternative to the car. The location and the type of accommodation proposed mean that the proposal is likely to be attractive to those without a car, but there is, of course, no guarantee that occupants would not have a car. A parking survey of the streets within 200 metres of the site does facilitate our consideration of the implications of the potential increased parking demand, so those 2 spaces. This was carried out at night when there would be peak occupancy of spaces using a recognised methodology approved by the Council, and the Council's highway officer raises no objection to how the survey has been undertaken. The parking survey, which you can see on the screen, indicates that during the 2 survey samples, parking stress is high. However, within the survey area, at least 11 spaces were available on the respective dates. As the proposal generates an additional 2 spaces over and above the existing use of the site, these could be accommodated within the surveyed area during the periods assessed. Daytime site visits by officers also confirmed spaces were available during these visits. So the photos you see on the screen, sorry, they're not all that clear. They are taken and taken at night and included in the parking survey, specifically showing spaces in the vicinity. These spaces are officer daytime pictures. So you can see the date there, it's a Tuesday. They were taken around the midday mark in terms of time, but just showing Conway Road itself and a neighbouring street in terms of the availability of parking during officer visits. We know that the planning authority must give considerable weight to the sustainability of the development in terms of its location, and in officer view, the additional 2 spaces generated by the development do not give rise to harm. There is a robust reason to refuse permission in this case. I'm aware that very close to this application site we've got a property called the Pioneer Club. It's a few doors away. The local members are probably aware of it. This has been subject to several applications in the past, and specifically an appeal in 2021 regarding 2 flats at first floor. It was rejected, obviously, by the planning authority, and the inspector considered the locality and parking-related concerns raised in relation to the case by local residents on that application. Now, the inspector was aware that the appeal would result in additional parking demand and that the appeal site did not include provision for any off-street parking. The inspector noted that the increased parking demand arising from the proposed development would be limited, and the site has good access to services, facilities and employment, and there are alternatives for travel other than by the private car. Consequently, the inspector considered it realistic to assume that occupiers would not necessarily need to own a car in this location to provide for their day-to-day needs. Now, whilst the inspector recognised that it is still likely that some of the future occupiers in that case would own a car, taking account of the evidence, it was concluded that there would be a sufficient amount of on-street parking available within comfortable walking distance of the site to accommodate the limited increase in parking demand arising from that development. Now, whilst the appeal was dismissed for other reasons, parking was not a reason to resist that development, and officers consider that the assessment of parking for this HMO proposal is compatible with the inspector's view on the flatted scheme close by. It's a couple of doors away. On the matter of flood risk, since time of writing, both the late representation report and the main report that you have, NRW has responded to a reconsultation following a change to the ground floor layout and the removal of a ground floor bedroom that was shown on the original plans. NRW has noted this change, noted that the property will still flood, and advised that it is for the local planning authority to assess whether risks can be acceptably managed. The officer's summing up on the flood risk point in the published report therefore remains valid. The FCA has failed to demonstrate full compliance with the TAN 15 tests, as the property will flood during modelled events. But given that the existing use as a dwelling will also flood, and is also highly vulnerable development in flood risk terms, and the proposal has no bedrooms at ground floor, officers remain of the view that the risk of flooding can be appropriately managed and is not demonstrably worse than the existing situation. In relation to waste, like neighbouring properties, it appears to rely on a wheelie bin being kept on the pavement. Now, whilst the application includes reference to a bin store area in the rear garden, there's certainly space for it, this would require receptacles to be taken through the house, and based on officer observations in the street, this seems unlikely in practice, and the existing dwelling and its neighbours clearly prefer on-pavement placement of bins and boxes. Now, given the size of the HMO having 4 bedrooms, the number of waste receptacles are no different to the use as a 2-bedroom house, and a 120-litre wheelie bin with recycling receptacles are applicable. Officers have sought comments from the service manager for cleansing and waste, specifically in relation to whether or not that service experiences more concerns or complaints regarding waste storage on HMO properties than other types of residence. She has confirmed that capacity of receptacle is based on the expected residential occupancy level, not on the use class of the residence. Now, the service manager has advised us that there is no clear link, in her view, between HMOs and poor waste management or complaints. Now, officers consider there to be no information that justifies an objection to this application on waste-related grounds. So, to sum up, the change of use would not result in an exceedance of the threshold set out in the Council's guidance, and it is considered that the proposals would not result in a demonstrable adverse impact to the character of the area. The proposals would potentially increase demand for parking when assessed against the Council's adopted SPG. This may lead to added inconvenience, but there is no technical highways objection, and the site is located within a highly sustainable location within close proximity to shops and services with good transport links, and we know this must be given substantial weight. It's recommended to members that the application is granted, subject to the stated conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Move on to public speakers. Could the public member please introduce himself? Not yet. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mr. Garrett. I'm one of the neighbours to the application.
Okay, and your name?
Mr. Garrett.
Oh, sorry, yeah, go on.
Chair, members, I strongly oppose this application. It fails multiple national and local planning policies, exposes residents to flood and fire risk, worsens parking stress and undermines community cohesion. The parking survey does not reflect lived experience. Flood risk TAN 15 breach. TAN 15 2025 sets strict thresholds for highly vulnerable development. Predicted flood depths 1.13 metres and 2.05 metres, far above the 600mm tolerable limit. Breach assessment, 810mm depth, again non-compliant. NLDP SP3 requires resilience, and the FCA fails. If approved, councillors override TAN 15, and that exposes residents and the council to liability. Highway safety and parking, GP4 and T4. Parking survey is flawed, conducted only at midnight, ignoring daytime peak demand, and many objections support this. The street's already at 90 to 100% occupancy. Demand rises from 2 spaces to 4, with no on-site provision. Unsafe intensification, and unreliable evidence base. Residential amenity GP2, GP7 and H8. Noise and disturbance from intensified comings and goings, waste impractical and would inevitably be left on the street. Overdevelopment, squeezing 4 unrelated adults into a small terrace reduces living standards. Overlooking, inadequate boundary treatment with number 5 Conway Road. Tangible and amenity harms contrary to GP2, GP7 and H8. Community cohesion, HMO, SPG. Officers cite 5.3% concentration, but this ignores cumulative impacts across Conwy and adjoining roads. Councillors and residents highlight transient occupancy, undermining family character. Policy H82 requires avoidance of over-concentration. Thresholds are guidance and not absolutes. Cumulative harm is demonstrable. Procedural and environmental emissions. Consultation is flawed. Sustainability appraisal is questioned. No green infrastructure statement, contrary to PPW 2024, Section 6.2.12 and NLDP GP5. Waste teams are silent. Statutory concerns unresolved. Procedural deficiencies weaken officer recommendation. This proposal breaches TAN 15, PPW 2024, LDP SP1, SP3, GP2, GP4, GP5, GP6, GP7, H8, T4, W3. It exposes residents to flood and fire danger, worsens highway stress, degrades amenity, erodes community cohesion and heightens fire safety risks. Intensified occupancy without proven escape provision, compounding amenity harms under GP2 and GP7. You have clear, defensible grounds to refuse, and I urge refusal of application 250841.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pym.
Thank you, Chair. As a ward councillor, I'm opposed to this application for a HMO. It's once again a glorified bedsit. Changing a mid-terrace two-bedroom property into a four-bedroom property is not adding any value to the local area. Residents are already concerned with a number of suspected unofficial HMOs within the area, and also the parking images that were published I would consider to be unrealistic as to the normal parking issues in this area, which are very congested. There have been issues of flooding within Conway Road recently, and with regards to the police's comments on antisocial behaviour and crime within the area, this is an area of our ward that does have a high risk of antisocial behaviour, petty drug dealing, county lines drug dealing, and general antisocial behaviour. We don't feel the introduction of another HMO within the area will add any value to the culture of this area of our ward. There is a risk of not just 4 people living in this property, that could quite easily become 8 people within months once relationships kind of develop. And so this property is not suitable for a HMO, in my opinion, and I've got the support of my fellow ward councillors who also oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I don't want to touch on what the resident and my fellow councillor have said, so I'll skip that. I do agree with the officer that the bin storage to me, is not going to be used. It will be left at the front, as most bins are in that area. Conway Road. Is it an area for HMOs? No. We have talked about HMOs in other streets around the area. When this part of Newport was built, it was built for residents to bring up their families, not to allow these properties to be turned into, to my understanding, small flats, you can say, although they're not adapted to that. However, I do have a few concerns. One is, Joe, could we go back to the drawing of the existing and proposed outlay, please? Bedrooms in the downstairs, yeah. That's it, thanks, yeah. As we can see on the left, there's an upstairs bathroom with 2 bedrooms. Great, and that to me is how a house should be laid out. If you go to the right-hand side, there is no upstairs bathroom. However, there is 4 bedrooms. In my opinion, and this is only my opinion, And I do know there are discussions going on within the council about HMOs, and you know, that's good to hear. However, in my opinion, is it hygienic and healthy that somebody who could come in from work, go upstairs to pick up a towel, to pick up his washing facilities, to go downstairs through a kitchen and dining area where people could be eating, preparing food in dirty, stinking clothes. Then do what they have to do, get showered, bath, whatever, and then get fully dressed again to come back in through a kitchen and dining area where anybody else in their home would just put a dressing gown on and come through their home, not through people's kitchen and dining facilities. This is my big objection on this, and I'd like the committee to please take this into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Take on board. Over to the committee. Questions? Sorry. Oh, yeah. Councillor. Yeah. Councillor Perkins.
So if we could go back to the bedrooms again. You said that the officers had been out and measured and the sizes are within what is allowed. But unlike the previous HMO that we've just seen, this one is very small. 6.5 you said is the smallest. And when you showed is there room for bed, the cabinet, for clothes storage? The amenity space there is not good enough as far as I can see, and the bathroom is now being moved downstairs through the kitchen. I don't think it's good enough. The sizes as a family home where their belongings are shared around the house, yes, but as a HMO, I can't see that is a livable size for a grown adult. Are those measurements taken with the walls in place, is my question.
Okay, the measurements, just to recap, first are 6.55, 8.4, 7.9, 6.6. So I'm not sure whether you think all the bedrooms are not sufficient or just possibly the smaller two of those. 6.55, 8.4, 7.9, 6.6 square metres. In terms of the measurements, yes, officers have been out. The subdivision of the front room, you could see on the photo, hadn't yet been undertaken, but we took account of the depth of the partition wall that would be required to do that. So those figures are, as far as we're concerned, accurate. The 6.55, 6.66, they are above the licensing standard, which is 6.51 square metres, but I appreciate only just.
Sorry, Councillor Rheoli.
Two questions. The first one is in protection of my colleague. Is Councillor Pym still in the chamber?
No, he's had to leave.
He did leave. Good, yeah. Good. That's okay then, I'm glad. The second one, I glad that the councillor mentioned the fact of where the bathroom is located, and given the fact that this is a very high-risk flooding area and the bathroom is located downstairs, and taking on board what what the former chair of this committee has said about walking through the house, walking through the eating areas and getting change and all the rest of it. That might, that might be okay in a normal household. But in a household of let's say, mixed unknown genders, that might not be appropriate. That type of thing, and I'm not quite sure. I need some guidance, either legally or otherwise, or even from the former chairman himself, or yourself. Under what grounds can we, if mindful to do so, could we refuse this application based upon what I've just said?
Obviously, you've got officer's recommendation and it's favourable before you, so it's not really for me to frame a reason for refusal for you, I would say. All I would say is that in my presentation and in the report, we've set out the key issues. Yes to flood risk, that's a key issue. Yes to the amenity of future residents, that's a key issue. Councillor Perkins has raised the point, it's been raised on previous HMOs that we've discussed at Planning Committee, that whilst the rooms may meet the licensing standards, they may not meet your standards as a Planning Committee. And the size of room, for example, if they are on the smaller side, particularly if you're dealing with a very small garden space, we're not here, I should say, or possibly some added layout factors that you think constrain the future amenities of future residents, then you, as a planning committee, obviously it's your prerogative to go against the officer's advice here. You have all the information in terms of the material considerations, but it is really for you to frame a reason for refusal if that is what the committee wants to do.
Is there any other legal advice then from the legal officer?
There's nothing further that I can advise you sort of legally. Any grounds for refusal would have to adhere to as Joe has just set out. So they have to be relevant to the planning application in front of you. Again, it's your own opinion of whether you think this meets the standard that you consider for example, residence amenity, etc. But there's nothing specific that I can point to regarding location of a bathroom and sort of moving through the house or how people would use it. That sort of sits outside of planning, how individuals would use a dwelling.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. We have any more questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Harvey.
Yes, just to touch on what Councillor Rheoli said, my concerns is that bathroom and toilet downstairs. If this is a flood risk area, if that house floods to, I think he said, between 1 and 2 metres, you're going to have raw sewage coming through the bottom of that house. So it won't be, it'll be, everything will have to be stripped out, everything will have to be cleansed. My concern is having that bathroom downstairs. Not even so much of people walking through, but if there's a flood, everything will be contaminated in that house. I don't think that bathroom should be there, and especially there as you have to walk through a kitchen to use it. That would be my objections. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. The main thing, or two things really. One is the flood risk. I can't see how NRW have approved it, not on the documentation which I've got. And the other thing is, Chair, in regards to the health and well-being of the residents of the property with that bathroom downstairs, I don't think it's appropriate as everybody said, it doesn't mean that the individuals using the bathroom upstairs, it doesn't mean that it's only the people living in that property is in the socialising area. It could be visitors coming there as well. Not necessarily staying there, but could be staying there. And if it's a mixed gender, I think it's not appropriate, and it doesn't consider the well-being, health and well-being of the residents which are there.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, no more questions? Okay. Could we have all those in favour of... Yeah. Could we have a proposer for the officer's recommendation for the approval of this application? No? Oh, okay. Do we have another proposer for refusal of the application? Right, yeah. Could we have a proposer for the reasons to refuse the application?
Chairman, I'm quite happy to help to develop that one, and that would be on the flood risk element, the bathroom located downstairs, the future generations' health and well-being has to come in there. You have to take all these things into account. It's not that I'm against HMOs. I'm against HMOs that don't meet my standard, and this doesn't meet the standard that we would expect. And so I look to other members of the committee who are far more experienced than myself to help develop that line.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Councillor Perkins, you seconding that, or are you adding to the reasons?
I would just add to the reasons. As I said, if it floods, there's no amenity for the tenants to continue staying in the house because the bathroom's downstairs. While you could have food in and eat it in your bedrooms if necessary, you can't use a bathroom that is flooded. There's no amenity, there's no safety for them there, the health and well-being aspect, and the general amenity to the bedroom sizes. These are fully grown adults with all their worldly goods, and we're putting them in smaller and smaller boxes if we approve this size of HMO.
Okay. Adam, would you, sorry, Andrew, would you like that?
Okay, so it seems that there's, as I said, I'm unclear at the moment whether members are looking at one reason for refusal or two, whether there's a reason for refusal in terms of the flood risk posing an unacceptable impact on future residential amenity, given it's downstairs, or whether there's a general reason for refusal based on amenity, given that the bathroom is downstairs, which will impact on the future health and well-being of residents alongside the flooding issues.
I think it's a combination of both of those things, Andrew, for me.
Okay, so
it's your second statement for me, Andrew.
Okay, so in that case, as I said, it sounds like members are minded to refuse the application, given a detrimental impact to future residents and their health and well-being on the basis that the bathroom is downstairs, causing an unacceptable impact on them, and the flood risk alongside of that, meaning you wouldn't be able to live there in the future. So if that is the case, then members would need to move a recommendation on that basis, because some members might want to put another thing in. Sorry, Joe.
Oh, just to pick up, Councillor Perkins raised the room size. rolled into the downstairs bathroom point, I think, so, and the well-being, safety, amenity of future residents.
Okay, so if a member could now put down all the reasons for the refusal based upon the officer's advice then for the reasons for refusal. Could we have that again clarified with every member? One speak. Councillor Rheoli.
Yes, Chair. Okay. I'm trying to. Excuse me. You know what I mean. We do take advice off the planning experts. We do listen to them, and we're taking advice on how to structure our objections accordingly, so it meets the right criteria for defence of this if this went to appeal. So I would outline exactly, we've all listened to it, so I don't need to go over it again. I would outline exactly as Andrew has explained and add in the room sizes as well, if that helps. So I would move that.
Okay, that's moved. Can we have a seconder for that motion refusal? Councillor Perkins. Okay, could we have a show of hands, please, for the recommendations to refuse the application? Okay, that's unanimous. Yeah. We do. Can we ask Councillor Pym to go back in?
It was refused.
A member of the public could leave if you wish. Okay. Moving on to item number 4 on the agenda, pages 46 to 61. This is the application number 25/0700. The site is land formerly known as the Open Hearth, Hendra Farm Drive, Newport, and this is in the Ringland ward. The officer presenting this application is Geraint Roberts, Principal Planning Officer. We do not have any public speakers on this matter. Okay, over to Geraint.
Right. Good morning, everyone. The application then 25/0700. This is for 32 affordable units comprising a mix of flats and houses and associated parking and infrastructure on the site of the former Open Hearth Public House in the Ringland ward. The proposal is for 3 pairs of semi-detached houses and 2 flatted blocks containing 24 flats in total. One block will be 2-storey and the other 3-storey, and it's before you because it's major development. Okay. The proposed dwellings are traditional in appearance with pitched roofs and would be constructed primarily of brick, render, grey board cladding and grey roof tiles. Details include stone effect windowsills, headers and detailing bands, overdoor canopies and other brick detailing. Balconies are proposed for the 3-storey block. Rainwater goods are to be in black UPVC and window frames, soffits, etc. will be in white UPVC. Okay, 48 parking spaces are provided and with some additional on-street capacity available. The site is currently in poor condition despite being cleared and has been subject to significant fly tipping. The site is bounded by dwellings to the east and west, the Southern Distributor Road to the south and Hendra Farm Drive to the north. The site slopes down from Hendra Farm Road, Hendra Farm Drive, and is immediately adjacent to the footbridge from Ringland to Llanwern High School. And the site is within the urban boundary. Okay, so we'll go to the slides now. The location then outlined in blue Most of you will be reasonably familiar with it, given its location close to the SDR. In terms of the aerial photograph then, what we can see is Llanwern High School here, this building located here, the footbridge is approximately there, and then the site is within that red circle. So, at more detail, this gives you some idea of the existing condition of the land, which, as I said, is quite poor. The former public house has been cleared, and in this area at the south-east of the site, where the cursor is now, that was formerly a petrol station, long since removed, but some of you may have memories of that. And again, the footbridge you can see prominent in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. Okay, so that gives you a reasonable idea of the existing site qualities, and you will notice vegetation is primarily along the edges, particularly the western and southern edge, so you will note the green infrastructure on the site. Okay. Moving onward then to what the site currently looks like. This is on the junction by Hendra Farm Drive and Fred Evans Close. You can see the sloping nature of the site dropping down towards the bottom, which is on the left-hand side of the slide. You can see, although it's winter, some of that current green infrastructure along the boundary to the west. And you'll get an idea again of the poor condition of the site in, again, sort of mid-left side of the slide, where you can see the remains of the former pub. Okay, swinging round then, again, that gives you just a further idea of the current nature of the site, and you can see Fred Edwards Close there on the left-hand side behind that brick screen wall. So they're existing two-storey houses, and you can see the road into the site, which will be retained and extended to serve the units which are proposed. Right then, in terms of layout, as the introduction explained, you will get effectively two pairs of semis across the front, facing onto Hendra Farm Drive. You'll note the road being extended into the southern part of the site and looping round to the parking area. Here will be the three-storey flatted unit, and across to the west, to the left-hand side of the slide, will be the two-storey flatted block. Okay, now in terms of separation distances from what's already there, I've tried to label that up for you. Face-to-face different distances from the bungalows to the west of the site to the proposed two-storey flats, 26 metres face-to-face, which is well within, actually well beyond our required distance of 20 metres. So mutual visibility between those units would be completely fine on distance terms, and the intervening vegetation will, to a large extent, be retained. Okay, we'll return to that point later. In terms of the three-storey block, the set-off is less. It's 11.5 metres to the boundary with the nearest house on Fred Edwards Close, so a little bit closer, and we'll return to that later as well and just explain why we think that separation is sufficient. Okay, just a little bit more detail. Say current condition of site is poor, as you can see from that slide, but that just gives you a clearer understanding of a relationship with the bungalows to the west. So you can see the new fence panel, which is sort of midway down to the right, and you can see the roof line of the bungalow stepping down, which reflects the gradient of the area. Okay, so that is the relationship really between the site and the existing development of the west, broadly, well, entirely acceptable in our view. In terms of Fred Edwards Close then, the three-storey block would be, as I say, within 12 metres of this, primarily this unit, the three that we can see in this photograph. But you'll note that that photograph was taken from an existing pedestrian bridge over the SDR, and it gives, well, very commanding views of those dwellings, certainly their amenity space, and also into rooms, which is why every single one of those houses has blinds on every window. So there is already a very high degree of overlooking of those units from the existing situation because of the presence of a footbridge. Okay, in terms of the vegetated boundaries, you'll appreciate that national policy is very keen on the maintenance and enhancement of existing green infrastructure. The way the site is set out, the bulk of the existing green infrastructure, the trees, can be retained. Some of them do need to be removed, though, either because they are of poor form or because they are ash and they are beginning to exhibit signs of ash dieback. So on this little slide, anything which is brown, so T25, T23, T22, T20, T19 is proposed for removal, but that also, of course, gives you an indication of how much will be retained, which is most of it. Okay. In terms of the green infrastructure then and what is proposed, this gives you an idea of the replacement and additional planting. Okay, so basically the green circles are trees which are proposed to be planted. So we're happy that the replacement level, the 3:1, is safely met on this site under this proposal. So we have no concerns over green infrastructure. In terms of open space on the site, some will be retained. That will provide a degree of amenity for residents. Now, on this slide, the blue here is private gardens for the houses. We're satisfied that they give appropriate levels of private amenity space to those units. However, the two-storey flatted blocks, which are in the bottom left-hand corner of the slide, they are flats, but they will also have, if you like, semi-private amenity space, again coloured in blue. That will be shared between the occupiers, but it is for the occupiers of those units only rather than for everybody, and again, we're satisfied that that would give sufficient private amenity space to them. The three-storey block, they all have proposed balconies to provide private amenity space, and again, we're satisfied that that is sufficient in the round for the residents of those units. And then the brown space on there is just general communal areas within the site which potentially can offer some amenity value to the people who live there. Okay. The yellow is a proposed local area of play or lap, which will provide, if you like, formal outdoor space. We anticipate that that will be available to the general population and not just for residents. Okay. So in terms of appearance, we said very traditional. You can see that in terms of scale and form. They're very typical of a traditional house form, so slightly retro-looking, significantly more detailed than many of the housing types already in the area, but we don't see that as a concern. This will sit in its own little visual envelope and will look perfectly fine in terms of appearance and materials which are proposed. Okay, so these are the three by Hendra Farm Drive. So if you're on Hendra Farm Drive looking into the site, that's the view. And you can see greyed out behind them the other units which are down the bank. Okay, so if you move down the bank into the site, the three-storey flats you can see there to the left, and you can see the gable end of the two-storey flats there on the right, but they present very much as traditional houses in their form. And again, moving on to that relationship with Fred Edwards Close, the gable end of the nearest house is outlined in red on that slide so that you can see the scale. Clearly the three-storey units are bigger, but we explained about the relationship between those existing houses and the block of flats and why we don't think the distances are problematic or significantly harm the amenity of the residents who are already on site, primarily because of the presence of that footbridge and the, well, to be honest, commanding views that it gives towards their houses and into their gardens. Okay, appearance then, as said, very traditional. That gives you an idea. They're quite attractive, as say, more elaborate than anything else nearby, but we don't see that as a problem. The floor plans just give you an indication of the layout, which is quite typical. These are the two-storey flats. The only real giveaway is that the flats is that they've got two doors each, if you see what I mean. One leading upstairs and one to the ground floor unit. Okay, again, appearance, this is one of the pairs of semis. Again, so far so typical, but it gives you a better idea of materials and appearance. And the flats you've already seen, and this is just a typical floor plan. Okay, so overall, we're satisfied with the development. We recommend that it's granted with conditions. There are other key issues which are raised in the report, which you may wish to discuss, but I don't want to labour any particular points. So I'll complete the presentation now and open it to the members for their comments.
Thank you very much, Geraint. As a ward member in this ward, I'd like to say a little few things. At the moment, I'm keeping an open mind on till I've heard all the debate that's going on regarding this application. But I'll give some historical context that since the open hearth has closed and got demolished, it's seen a lot of a significant rise in antisocial behaviour and fly tipping on that land, and it's come to a very unsightly state. So any improvement within this land area will be greatly appreciated by all residents of Ringland Ward, I would imagine. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Pym.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very familiar with the area. I think I attended about 10 fires there in another job. So it's nice to see that the area has been cleared and hopefully will be developed soon. The one thing that I would mention, again, it's probably not, comes under planning, maybe more licensing or covered by nothing, is the proximity of this site in terms of the high school opposite. Am I right in saying that there is a bridge that leads directly from this site to the school? So a concern would be, is what type of resident would be placed here? Again, with the school so close and with the traffic and footfall of so many pupils passing through this area, I think Headden have to be very careful with who they house in this site. So could that be something that planning could come under planning as a condition? No.
Short answer, no. The letting policies of Thai Headden are entirely their own to administer. Planning is not a means of social control, so effectively, no, there's no planning intervention on controlling the character of residents. All I can say is they will be people.
Okay. Could I ask a question regarding the footbridge and the proposed development with regard to antisocial behaviour, lighting issues along that area? I don't see any street lighting, or what have we got to so is this not in the dark, as it were, and safety for those pedestrians up and down the stairs?
No, we haven't got a lighting scheme, and we haven't sought one. Part of it's adopted highway and will remain so. Other parts of it will undoubtedly be private. The footbridge and the path to the footbridge, which you can see in the photograph, they will remain ours, under council control. So if we want to light those, then we can. If you're concerned about lighting within the scheme per se, then that's certainly something we could condition if you were minded to ask for it. So yes, what is public remains public. What is private will be private. If you're concerned about the private areas and how they will be lit, then yes, we can secure a lighting scheme.
Yeah, thank you, because I'm concerned about antisocial behaviour and dark areas, unlit areas in that area. So if you could perhaps, the members agree, and that you could propose or have a look at the lighting issues in that area. Councillor Perkins.
So it says on there about ground contamination, because as you said that there used to be a petrol station there. It says that they've been unable to get onto the site to check the contamination levels. Can you guarantee that the soil any contaminations will be removed totally before any building is started? And then a second question, seeing that photo there, you've got the house with a high fence this side. Will the building then create another high fence outside, therefore creating an alleyway? And if so, how do we mitigate the dangers of alleyways?
In terms of the ground contamination, we know the site has got previous uses which potentially will have led to ground contamination, i.e. the petrol station. We don't know anything about the clearance, so the tanks might still be there, they might not, we just don't know. However, the conditional regime will require full ground investigation, putting together a decontamination plan, then requiring that plan to be carried out, and then requiring that the success of that plan, its implementation and success, is demonstrated to the local planning authority before works of construction can carry on. So there is a full suite of decontamination conditions on this site. they are the normal conditions at which we would apply in this case. Obviously, the other potential issue on this site is we don't know what people tipped on it. So that's another reason why we needed that very thorough set of decontamination conditions which are proposed to be applied. In terms of boundaries along that footway, there's no risk of a tunnel effect. They propose various boundary treatments around the site, which they've given details of to us. We had concerns over one, and one of the conditions we're suggesting is that details of an alternative are provided, because the one they were giving us wasn't very good in our view. However, all the others were railings or were suitable in context, but no, we weren't concerned about a tunnelling effect on that footway, because what they're proposing wouldn't have done that. We'll also make sure that the conditions say you can't put up any other means of enclosure without our agreement. You're right, if that was tunnelled, it would be problematic, and we wouldn't want that. So that's a good observation.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask a question. The flats you were building, are they mixed, i.e. as in 1 and 2 bedroom in each block, or is it just going to be 1 bedroom in one block, 2 bedroom in the next block? Because I'm just thinking of the demographic it creates. So could you answer that question, please?
Right, we'll go back to the floor plans, which I think is the easiest way of addressing that. So if you look at, let's get rid of this. Well, we're going to look at this one because that's the only one it's going to let us look at right now. These are the houses. No.
I am here, Chair. I just need a charger for my iPad.
Right. What's that 115? Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah. Let's have a look. Okay. I'll put this bigger, hopefully. Right. These. Right, these are the 2-storey flatted blocks, okay, and so you can tell they're flats because they've got these 2 front doors. So ostensibly it looks like a house, but in reality it isn't. So what we have then is these are ground floors which are effectively replicated upstairs. So you can see bedroom 1, bedroom 2, and whereas this one inside is just 1 bedroom. So some of them are 2 beds, some of them are 1 beds, and they're stacked. So you'll see that replicated. And they're also symmetrical, so it's replicated. So within that unit, there are going to be 4 2-bed units, and the rest are single bed. In terms... Right. Let's try again. That's the very last one. The floor plan for the flats is the last one. Okay. In terms of the 3-bed units, again, they're mostly, in terms of a 3-storey unit, they're mostly 1 bed, but you can see that there are some 2 beds, which are this slightly different shade. I don't know how clear that is to you, but it's these are more brown and this is slightly more grey in coloration. So both blocks contain a mixture of 1 and 2-bed units, but the primary provision is single-bed units, but that strategically fits with what housing need there is within this area. I'm not sure if that is sufficient clarity for you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want making sure they was mixed. It just wasn't all single-bed flats. You know, so it's so you get a nice mixture of 1 and 2 bedrooms. Thank you very much.
Councillor Rheoli.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if you can go back to the communal area that everybody could be gathering in for me on your slides.
Right,
Yeah, thank you. Looking at that, it looks absolutely. It looks very close to the accommodation, pretty close to either the flats or the houses. I can't see from here, but it looks very close to it. And one of the major problems that we have when we build stuff is we build future areas of congregation, not of a healthy nature either. That's going to cause lots of noise, lots of problems, and I'm thinking for the ward councillors here as well. I wouldn't like to see that in an area that sort of I was living in, because I know I know we're building problems for the future. Now you're going to tell me it's a long way away from the houses, aren't you? But from here it doesn't look like.
Are we talking about the yellow shaded area, Councillor?
Yes, we are indeed.
No, it's very near the houses. That is certainly correct. It is a relatively small area. It is proposed as a local area of play. What we like to see is that these are delivered as effectively pocket parks. So they are small, they are fenced. We expect a bench and a bin. They will have no formal play equipment upon them. Okay, so there won't be any swings or slides or roundabouts. It is simply a small space that particularly very young children might wish to use, and potentially with the attendance of their parents as well, given their very young age. So this is not, it's not like a locally equipped area of play, which is what people typically think of, which is a good old-fashioned playground. It won't be like that. It's a much smaller, less formalised area, and it will not contain play equipment. So our view is that given the likely users, young children, their parents, there's very little which is attractive to teenagers here. And of course it's very close to houses, which means there is observation of it. So anyone who's intended to be antisocial or up to no good may well not be attracted to this area because of the proximity of people who will oversee it informally.
Any comments from the local members on it?
I've given my comments, Councillor. The development looks really good, and for the area that it's located in, anything's better than what we had previous. Was that unsightly land? As I say, if there was a large play area in that vicinity, because Ringwood does suffer mainly from a lack of play facilities in the ward, but it could, if there was play area there, it could exacerbate the situation for the congregation on there. But if it's as a green space and the young children, mothers can sit there, and there is a green area they can utilise.
I listen. I think it's a wonderful scheme. I remember the open half with very, very fond memories indeed, and the Texaco garage that was there on the end as well. But it's lovely to see this area finally coming into use. And the only thing is, I wonder what took it so long, just so long. But overall, yes, it's a very good scheme.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Do we have any more? Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, with the bridge going across the SDR road, I'm assuming that goes to the school, only the school. Is that correct? Okay. What's the position of just having gates put on there during school time to prevent.
I believe it's used at night as well, because we got the football pitches, 3G and all that. Okay.
It's gated at the school end. Okay. So when I was there taking the photographs, there's a gate on it because obviously the school wants to control access onto their site. But ultimately that's a matter for the school to decide how they want to run it. But yeah, there's not a gate at the development end, the gate is at the school end.
Yeah, I thought it was, but I just wanted to confirm it. But there was a gate on there because I believe there was at one time, but there still is. That's okay. The only thing, other thing I have, two things really. You mentioned about overlooking to that one property on the right-hand side from the bridge. What's the situation of overlooking on the three-storey property which is proposed to be built? Is that going to be overlooking as well?
Short answer, yes. This is the layout. There are habitable room windows and there are balconies on this eastern elevation of the three-storey building, and they will give some level of overlooking towards these existing dwellings, which we completely acknowledge. Let's find it. So this drawing gives you that clarity on that point. Okay, so these are habitable room windows. This is a balcony, and this is the outline of that unit. Okay, so we're not saying there won't be more overlooking of the gardens. There will be, clearly, but we assess that when you consider the pre-existing situation, which is already very overlooked, then we don't consider it to be significantly worse than the existing situation.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that we if we can prevent it, we prevent it. It might be, I'm going to say, on that particular property, but if there's any need and we can prevent it on any other properties close by, I'm quite happy to look at that. The other thing, Chair, is noise from the SDR. What sort of mitigation is being put in place by the developer in regards to the noise coming from the SDR to those properties?
Yeah, we have a noise assessment because clearly the primary control on the site is road noise rather than anything else. So there are some things which we cannot mitigate, which is primarily external noise, which is to say that if you are at the southern end of the site, beyond the buildings, next to the SDR, you're going to hear the SDR. Okay. If you open your window, you will hear road noise because it is a site affected by road noise. However, what the conditional regime will do is protect the building envelope. So the windows, construction techniques will all mitigate that noise down to acceptable levels internally, and it will require mechanical ventilation so that those rooms can be ventilated, because obviously you appreciate some of them are south-facing, they're going to get hot, and they will need to be able to ventilate those rooms for cooling purposes. So the condition will require details of windows, building technique, and mechanical ventilation so that those rooms can be appropriately soundproofed and ventilated with the windows closed. Because if the windows are open, then the required standard is exceeded. So we acknowledge that, and we acknowledge that the external areas of the site, particularly between those southern buildings and the road itself, will be exposed to road noise. However, these flats, they have a different expectation in terms of private amenity space over perhaps a house might. We still want balconies, for example, which will be noise affected, but we take the view that the residents will choose to use them or not, as is their preference, but we want them to have the option available to have that private outdoor space. So yes, the site is noise affected, but we think subject to conditions it can be suitably mitigated to make the development acceptable.
Chair, with the balconies, are they Juliet balconies or just a balcony which you can step out on?
True balconies.
Okay, thank you, Chair, that's all.
Okay, Councillor Horton, got your hand up?
Yeah, I'd like to put a condition into that they have to put lighting along where the footpath is going to run into the school, please.
Have I already asked for that, Councillor?
So, well, I'm just officially proposing that we do that.
We haven't proposed an external lighting scheme for the site. We can do. There's
That's
no
why
reason-
I'm proposing that we put a condition in where there is some form of external lighting where the entrance to the bridge is, please.
My only note of concern would be any lighting they provide has to be to their own ends and purposes. We can't ask them to light a public footway because that's ours.
In that case, could you come up with some way of doing that then, please? So that it is possible to do that.
Yeah, what we would do is we would condition details of a lighting scheme, but we can't require a private developer to light public infrastructure, in my mind. We might inadvertently get some betterment, but we can't say you have to design your lighting scheme to illuminate our highway.
I understand and I appreciate what you're saying, but this green space which is between, unless there's a fence or some sort of a barrier going up between the green space below this black arrow, a double-ended arrow, my concern would be that could be an area of congregation. That would be my concern, that could be an area of congregation which I believe would require some form of lighting, so that is their area. And then that would deter anybody congregating in that area.
Yeah, it's perfectly reasonable to ask them to light their own site, and that's what the condition would do. We would ask for a lighting scheme.
Yes, okay. No, that's fine then.
So when we come to the vote, members, as I said, someone will have to move a recommendation with that suggested condition, and it will need to be seconded and then voted on, just to be clear on process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay then, so if everybody's finished, we move to the motion to add the lighting.
Do we have a motion?
Do we have the motion to introduce
Yeah,
this
I'd like
lighting
to
scheme?
propose.
Councillor Orton, you propose
Chair,
that?
I propose that, Chair.
Seconder for
Yeah,
that?
I will, please. Yeah.
I'll second that one. Okay. And now, could we, all those in favour of accepting, those in favour of accepting the officer's recommendations to grant this development? With the additional momentum for that lighting. Those in favour? I think that's unanimous. Right, thank you very much. That is now granted. I think that's it. Oh, we've got the appeal section of the...
Just in case you've got any comments for them.
Yeah, okay. And